Hi, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to the Red Leaf Designs Guide on Wood Gunnel Maintenance. If you have a beautiful wood-trimmed canoe like this North Star Phoenix, you know that these rails across the top of the boat, called gunwales, aren't just for looks. They provide critical structural stability, support, and rigidity to the hull. Because they're constantly exposed to sun and water, they can weather fairly quickly, and they require regular maintenance to prevent damage and extend their life. Before we get into that, however, let's talk about the materials and tools you're going to need to take care of them. So you will need to gather together 100 and 220 grit sandpaper, which I have here. A firm foam sanding block is recommended. That makes it much easier to sand. You'll need some rags or tack cloths, both for cleaning up sawdust and also for wiping off excess oil. You'll need some low odor mineral spirits. You'll need a penetrating oil. Don't use a urethane or a spar varnish, and I recommend the Watco exterior wood finish. It's hard to find locally in most hardware stores and home centers, so I order mine from Rutabaga Paddle Sports or from North Star Canoes. A natural bristle brush, this is just a cheap chip brush, to apply the finish, as well as some type of container to put it in. Masking tape, and I prefer the 2-inch green or blue painter's tape. And then you'll need personal protective equipment. That can include gloves, a respirator, or a dust mask for the sanding dust, as well as eye protection. But that's it, and without further ado, we can go ahead and jump into the boat work. So now that we have all of our materials gathered together, it's time to assess the condition of our gunnels. I'll simply walk up and down the boat and run my hands along the gunnels. I'm looking for any areas that are splintered or cracked or gouged, anything that might be very gray and weathered or soft, anything that's rotten or broken. I'm looking for loose fasteners. I'm paying special attention to the end of the boat here where the deck is, as well as where the gunnels come together at the tip of the boat. These are places where water can get into these screw holes or gather on the bottom of this deck when the boat's stored upside down. So looking for any dark or rotten wood there. Anything that suggests I need major repairs. And in this case, this boat's in great shape. So it still needs some TLC. When water lands on these gunnels at this point, it's not beating up and running off. They look a little bit dry, and it's been a year since I last really attended to them. So it's time. It's ready to be done. In terms of preparation, we want to do this in a place that's going to be between 50 and 90 degrees. It needs to stay dry for about 12 hours. I want to set the boat at a reasonable height to make it easier for myself. I happen to have padded sawhorses here. Official boat stands would work. You could put this on top of a picnic table. I've seen people set it on their porch. And so whatever you need to do to make it a comfortable working environment for you is a good idea. I am going to remove my thwarts and my seat. This time around, I do that about once a year so that I don't have to worry about working around these screw heads, and I don't have any areas that I can't get to because they're blocked by other pieces of wood. It also gives me a great opportunity to take a look at my seat frames, at my thwarts, and do any refinishing that's needed there. So I'll take those off in just a moment, and then as soon as I've done that, I'm going to mask the boat both inside and outside with that 2-inch masking tape. So you can watch me do that, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, that took me just under 6 minutes to remove the thwarts and the seat, as well as put the masking tape on. So it really is not a long process. In this case, the thwarts and the seat look like they're in great condition. Now it is time to sand. So we're going to start with 100 grit. We're going to do a quick round of 100 grit, and then we'll come back with 220 just to smooth everything out. And then it will be time for oiling. So here we go. Okay, the gunnels are sanded. That took me about 15 minutes or so. At this point, I'm going to grab my shop vac, clean up the boat, clean up around the boat, clean up the floor. All right, that's another 5 minutes invested in cleaning up the sawdust. I made sure that I got all of the dust out of the screw holes, both on the decks and on the interior of the gunnels around the entire perimeter. I also made sure that I got it out of the scuppers in the decks. That's important because once the oil meets that sawdust, it can create kind of a goop, and it just gets in the way of being able to get in and check the tightness and the security of your fasteners. So all of that is taken care of. Now it's a wipe down with mineral spirits. So that's next. And that's it. The mineral spirits is on. We'll just give it about 5 minutes for it to flash off and evaporate, and then we'll apply the oil. All right, now it is time to apply our Watco exterior finish. This is a stain, a sealant, and a protectant all in one. So it's not going to come out of the can looking perfectly clear. Don't panic. It really won't change the color of your wood or the appearance of your gunnels. You can see it comes out looking slightly brown. That's okay. Again, don't panic. I've poured it into this small cup, and I'm just going to use this natural bristle brush to flood it onto the surface. So I want it to be on that surface fairly thick. Not thick, but very wet. So time for that. So I've just finished one side. I'm going to quickly grab a rag and just walk along and wipe up anywhere that I see a drip that's gotten on the hull, because I don't want this to get onto the glass or the exterior surface and dry. It'll leave a difficult to remove mark if I allow it to do that. So I'm also going to check the inside of the boat for the same thing. So you can see I'm laying it on pretty thick here so that the wood is completely flooded and there is actually standing or pooling exterior wood finish on the wood. So it has plenty of opportunity to soak in, and the wood can absorb as much as it wants. So I'm going to finish up this side, go back and wipe up any drips the way I did earlier on the first side, then take a walk around to see if I see any spots that look dry, and then I'll reflood those. And then I'll take Q-tips and I'll come back to get into each of these hanger holes for the thwarts and the seat hangers. Okay, I have touched up all of the areas that looked dry and looked like they had soaked in all of the finish. So everything is nice and wet, which is the goal, so that the finish can really soak into the wood. We're going to let it sit for 30 minutes, and then I'll come back and do a second coat or a second application. So don't clean the finish off in between the two applications. You want to leave the original finish on and then put a second coat on after 15 minutes, after 30 minutes. So 30 minutes, second coat. And that is what we're going to do now. All right, there's our 30 minutes. You can see that it still looks wet, but I'm going to apply the second coat. So I'll apply a second coat, go back again and do the same thing with mineral spirits and just clean off any drips, and then let it sit for another 15 minutes. So that's coming up now. Okay, we're in the home stretch. It's sat for another 15 minutes, and we are now ready to wipe off any excess that's left on the wood. Then we have to let this sit for 8 to 10 hours between 50 and 90 degrees with no moisture. So beware if you're doing this outdoors. You don't want to allow the temperatures to drop at night. You don't want condensation or dew to form on it. So make sure that this is in a place where it can cure for 8 to 10 hours between 50 and 90 degrees with no moisture. So I'm just going to wipe everything off, remove my tape, double check for any runs that I need to clean off with mineral spirits, and then I'm just going to let it sit. So in the morning when I come back, after I do these next couple of steps, then we'll reassemble everything and talk about the finished product. So here we go. Let's wipe her down with some clean cloths. Okay, now we just let it cure for about 8 to 10 hours. So see you in a bit. And that's it. I let this go a little bit longer than that 8 to 10 hours. It's actually been about 24 hours because it was a busy day. But that last coat of oil has now cured inside the pores of the wood. The wood is protected. It feels smooth and natural, but it's also water resistant and ready to face the challenges of a new season. Typically, I would do this in the spring, just as the season is opening. That will typically get me through almost the entire season. But if in August or September I notice that the water is no longer beating up on my gunnels, or they're looking dry or beginning to look weathered, I'll just quickly do a 220 sanding. I will not remove the thwarts or the seats. And then I'll just do one flood coat of the oil, wipe it off, let it cure for 8 to 10 hours, and then that gets me through to the next spring. So that's it. That's all you have to do to make these gunnels last a lifetime. Before we close out here, let's talk about a few common mistakes and a couple of tips that will make things a lot easier. First, make sure that you're using a penetrating oil, something like Watco's exterior finish or Watco teak oil. Don't use, in my opinion, don't use a film finish like a marine varnish or a urethane, because it will create a plastic finish, a plastic film on top of the wood. Those plastic films will get chips, they will get cracks, water will get in past them where there are screw penetrations and other things, and those finishes will trap the water inside, creating mold and rot. So I much prefer an oil finish to a film finish. If you're refinishing these gunnels outdoors, tip number 2 is to make sure that you protect them during that 8 to 10 hour cure. You want to make sure it's protected from a temperature drop at night and protected from dew and condensation that could form on them. So that is tip number 2. Tip number 3 is that it may be tempting to use a 100% plant-based oil, like 100% natural tongue or hemp or linseed oil. But those oils take a long time, sometimes months and months to polymerize. They also don't penetrate as deeply into the wood, and they leave behind organic compounds that serve as food for the mold that creates mildew. So I really prefer products like Watco's exterior oil or Watco's teak oil. Both of those have synthetic solvents to help penetrate deeper. They have synthetic dryers to make them cure completely, and they do not have the organic compounds that serve to feed the mold that makes mildew. So highly recommend using those synthetic oils. Finally, remember that an hour of preventative maintenance at the beginning of the season and maybe a quick touch-up in August or September is the difference between gunnels that will look great and last a lifetime and gunnels that need a complete replacement. It is worth the time to protect this investment. As we wrap up, remember that proper maintenance of your wooden gunnels isn't just about looks. It's about protecting your investment and making sure that your canoe stays seaworthy for a long time. Make sure that you do the proper prep work. Make sure that you use the proper penetrating oils, and make sure that you're proactive and stay ahead of rot and weathering. Thanks so much for watching. Happy paddling.